BLM usually has a bad rep in many cycles, not only because of their often disruptive protests, which sometimes turn into violent riots, but also because of their mismanagement of donated funds. It's therefore easy to dismiss them as a corrupt, victim peddling organization. But like most things in life, there is a lot more nuance than simply saying that BLM is totally useless or bad. In this podcast, highlight a number of positive things the actions of BLM has led to, and analyze a clip from Coleman Hughes where he explains what the upsides and downsides of BLM has been. Recently, a local chapter of BLM in Dallas did something quite admirable. While having a protest, they were met by another group of people holding a counter protest. But instead of it devolving into violent clashes as it sometimes does, both sides were civil enough to send representatives for dialogue, just like in a peace negotiation.
Too black, too strong. Too black, too strong. Too black, too strong. Too black, too strong. All about it. All power to the people. All power to the people.
I can't just sit back and feel this way without trying to change it.
You got the Black Lives Matter and stuff. We all matter, hell. We all on board.
When the representatives were done talking, everyone from both groups came together to give each other hugs, handshakes, after which they had a prayer together.
Keep it now, brother. Yes, sir, brother. Y'all, brothers and sisters. This is how you kick down the wall. This is how you kick down the wall. Yes, sir.
I'm Cody, nice to meet you.
It's time for us to stop this today. No more walls.
Today, we're going to show the rest of the country how we came together.
Everybody get it in here, man. Everybody get it in. Everybody get it in. Everybody get it in, man. Everybody get it in.
And I thank you so much, as I am so humble that you allowed us to come a long time ago. And that today, I pray again, thank you so much. I pray that everybody makes it. Amen.
No, this is how to solve problems. When people put aside their ideological differences and come together for the common good. Some people erroneously feel attacked when someone from a different ideological position is making certain demands. For example, every time there's a police shooting of an unarmed black person in America and protests ensue, some white folks interpret such protests as an attack or an indictment on them. There's probably a reason for them to feel that way. But ask yourself, how is a protest against police brutality a reflection on me? Some may say, well, the cops kill more unarmed white people than unarmed black people. And you don't see us protesting that. And my question would be, and you're okay with that? You're okay with cops killing unarmed white people? I may not like the tactics of BLM as they sometimes devolve into riots where lives and properties get lost and damaged. I also do not like their framing of the victim narrative. I think it's a disempowering message. But they are in fact calling attention to a real problem. These problems are not imagined. It's a matter of fact that sometimes US cops are trigger happy. At other times, they escalate a situation unnecessarily. So when such tragedies occur, shouldn't there be some form of accountability? And when people protest asking for such accountability, how is that a reflection on any demographic? In my verdict, BLM hasn't been totally useless. Their actions have achieved some milestones in terms of police accountability. Listen to Coleman Hughes explain what he thinks the upsides and downsides of BLM has been.
Someone asked me recently what I feel about BLM. Mm-hmm. And I listed some of the positive things BLM had done. For instance, almost no police ever got held accountable for almost anything.
Yeah.
Before BLM, whether they killed a black kid or a white kid or like police just did not get punished. And now police do sometimes get punished.
Yeah.
So that I put in the win column. But in the loss column is the greatest spike in homicide experienced by the black community possibly ever in terms of year over year increase. You know, your average person that supported the general vibe of the BLM moment does not know that.
Yeah.
And hasn't been made to account for that. So that's That's something I think about quite a lot.
For the upside, it's true that more police are being held accountable for extrajudicial killings. In fact, just recently, 3 Dallas cops have been found liable for the death of Tony Timper, the white man who was killed by cops in a similar circumstance as George Floyd, often being referred to as the white George Floyd in some circles. His son has been awarded $1 million by a federal jury. Now, this may not have been possible if BLM had not called attention to police brutality and the killing of unarmed people. Considering the fact that this killing took place in 2016, it took 3 years for the police department to release the footage and another 7 years before anything resembling justice was met out. Looking at specific policy issues, BLM activism has advocated for a number of policing reforms, including the Justice in Policing Act of 2020, a police reform and accountability bill that contains measures to combat police misconduct, excessive force, and racial bias in policing. The Ending of Qualified Immunity Act, a bill that sought to remove the judicial doctrine of qualified immunity that protects law enforcement personnel from being held personally responsible for violating the rights of citizens. An interesting thing to note is that none of these bills have passed Senate votes. They all seem like reasonable legislation to me, so I wonder why politicians have not taken action on them. Looking at the End Qualified Immunity Act, for example, one might say, well, police officers need to know that they can do their jobs properly without fear of legal liabilities that prevent them from acting in full capacity. To which I would say yes, but also, no individual should have the power to violate the rights of citizens in the process of discharging their duties without any personal liabilities. It just gives room for a lot of abuse of power. Now, if you're looking for something fun and exciting to read, check out my crime fiction novel, which features a debate on race and colonialism. Grab a copy and enjoy the read. The link is in the description of the video. Back to Coleman Hughes. He stated that part of the downside of BLM was increased homicide following BLM's activities. I struggle to see how that is BLM's fault. Stay with me. What I saw happened was that the police deliberately pulled back because they felt they were being unfairly attacked. They felt that the people calling for defunding the police did not want to have police in their communities at all. I used to think that was what the defund police literally meant. But listen to Brianna Greyjoy in a conversation with Coleman Hughes explain the defund the police movement in a way that made more sense than simply calling for the eradication of police.
The defund movement isn't abstractly saying, let's tear down the fence because fences are bad. It's saying, well, we've been putting more and more money into the fence, making it higher and higher every year. And there's no correlation between increasing funding to this preventative measure and a decline in crime rates, quite to the opposite. So Pinker and those types tend to look at broad, generalized global trends. But when you look at these more specific local trends of how much money, 50%, over 50% of LA's entire city budget is going to the police. So I think the questions has to start to be asked. What's the number that you're going to get the crime rate down if people are concerned with crime? 60% of the budget, 70% of the budget? Should all of the resources and tax dollars of LA citizens go into creating a police state? Or should we start to experiment with other tools to see, well, if other things are correlating with crime, if having after school programs for kids correlates with lower crime rates, if not having lead in drinking water correlates with lower crime rates, if kids having better educational options and options for job placement and growth as an adult, are they less likely to commit crimes? Or is better housing correlated with less crime? Then maybe it starts to be more advantageous to invest in those things instead of continuing to kind of throw money at something that doesn't seem to be working.
Now, I admit there are radicals who actually believe in the total eradication of police, but we can do well to dismiss them as nut jobs. As Brianna stated, with the police funding at the time, the results from police wasn't outstanding or stellar. For example, the police rarely prevented crimes and were not that adept at solving crimes either. Nationally, in the US, 38% of murders, 66% of rapes, and 17% of robberies go unsolved. I don't know a private company with such underwhelming performance that would not be under serious trouble. But I get why we cannot apply such market principles to police. They are essential despite these horrible results. There's, however, a mantra that says doing things the same way repeatedly but expecting different results is the definition of madness. Has it occurred to anyone that the issue of crime is not that of funding to the police departments? I mean, if, as Brianna said, 50% of LA city budget goes to the police and crime is still that rampant, will the results be any better at 100% funding for the police? Or should funds be redirected to other areas that may be more impactful in preventing crime? Brianna has listed some of those things, so I'm not going to repeat them. Republican Rep. Jim Jordan claimed this year that 21 police departments had been defunded to the tune of $1 billion. But it turns out that those 21 departments had not defunded their police departments, but proposed to do so. In fact, 14 of those departments later did not go on with that proposal, leaving maybe just 7 departments as those who may have actually defunded their police departments. Doing further research, I discovered something quite interesting about police funding. ABC's analysis of police budget data shows police spending has increased in some of the very cities frequently cited by conservative politicians and pundits as places where Democrats' defunding has fueled violent crime waves. The Los Angeles Police Department's budget is up by 9.4% since 2019. San Francisco's police budget is up by 4%, and Philadelphia is up by 3%. In Chicago, police spending is up 15%, representing almost $250 million in new police spending since 2019. In a bid to prove a point, the police pulled back significantly from discharging their duties, and this led to criminals taking advantage of less policing to wreak havoc. Look, any society needs adequate policing to function, and however bad the police are, they are still an overwhelming force for good. But that doesn't mean that rogue cops should get a pass. In fact, cops should be held to a higher standard because they literally have the power of death in their hands. The people entrusted with keeping society safe must be those of utmost character. Even in my country, I have many reasons to be suspicious and dismissive of police. Recently, my baby brother was victimized by the police. What happened is enough for me to hold a grudge, but the police are a net good for society. They just have to be held accountable. Part of the reason why BLM is seen as so divisive, at least racially in the US, is that race is so entrenched in American society that problems are assigned by race. That is why crime is seen as a black issue and not an American issue. Even if crime is predominant in the African American demographic, it's still an American problem, not just an African American problem. And it would require Americans coming together to figure out a solution to the problem. Back to the group of protesters and counter-protesters. These were two groups of Americans probably ideologically opposed to one another, but they put all that aside, shook hands with one another, hugged one another, and prayed together. This approach has a better chance of getting something done than if they had been otherwise adversarial. I mean, it's their country. One group is not going to live for the other, so why not find a way to work together instead? These people have proven that it can be done. Be like them. So that's the video. If you like what we do on this channel, consider becoming a channel member or patron. However, your likes, shares, and views are just as valued.